Hi and welcome back to another Watchlist, my somewhat weekly rundown of what I've been watching over the past days, weeks and months. I've just recommended this in my recent Criterion recommendations watch, so if you want to learn more about it, I watched All That Jazz by Bob Fosse, which is been described as basically the Broadway version of The Red Shoes. The Red Shoes being one of my all-time favourite movies by Paul and Pressburger, which looked at ballet in the theatre. This one looks at Broadway musical, starring Rob Schneider, amongst others. I just thought this was an absolutely terrific film. Not a comfortable watch in that Roy Scheider plays a character called Joe Gideon, who is not very likeable. He's a complete egomaniac, born out by the fact that a lot of people tell him he's the best director in all of Broadway. So it feeds into his ego, and he can't help but live the ego lifestyle, which is that he just constantly sleeps around, he can't be faithful, he's a bit of a pill problem, and he also has heart problems, as it turns out through the movie. And it is all about that kind of balance between, you know, can he get work, life and his health balance right. But there's a lot of heavy imagery in the movie. I think the fact that they picked Roy Scheider to play, although it was originally supposed to be Richard Dreyfuss, which would have been an interesting change, an eminently likeable actor to play an eminently unlikable character is rather interesting, and one that I really adored. The extras in this disc are something else as well, between interviews with Bob Fosse, between interviews with the principal female characters that are in the film, and it is very much as much a study about the female characters that are in Joe Gideon's life as much as Joe Gideon himself. A really brilliant release as well as film. Next one I watched was an indicator release. It's See No Evil with Mia Farrow. It tells the story of Sarah, I believe her character is, who returns home, or returns to live with her aunt and uncle, I think it is, in the country, after suffering an accident which has left her blind. And the story tells of Sarah trying to navigate life as a blind woman, but in the face of it, where a massacre has happened at home. And it's really chilling. Another amazing film to pick as a release from Indicator. One that I, again, never would have seen without. But the whole thing of chilling, because she can't see what is going on in the house around her when she comes home one day and realises that there's just been a murder in the house. And she's oblivious to it. But as the killer stalks the house still, I mean, the whole thing I just think is absolutely fantastic. It is wonderfully directed, wonderfully written, and you know, the extras back that up. They have interviews with the main male lead, who plays Steve in the film, as he talks about both working with Mia, working with the director Richard Fleischer, and just fabulous release. I really enjoyed this. Again, one of my favourite Indicator releases that there's been. Definitely joins that hallowed list. Next up was Third Window Films release, Takeshi Kitano. So I just got the BFI box set, so I should be working my way through it, but no, I decided to watch Dolls instead. And lo and behold, I thought this was bloody fantastic as well. Really amazing. It tells three different stories that kind of slightly interlock about love. So the first story tells the story of a male character who on his wedding day is reminded of his former fiancée girlfriend, who has had a mental breakdown, basically tried to kill herself, and that he thought she was dead but found out that she is still living, and he drops his wedding that he's currently at to go and look after her, and they basically go on a walk on a crusade as he tries to rehabilitate her, or basically care for her, because he feels responsible, and partly is responsible for what led her to that place. There's another shorter story where you have a former Yakuza boss, well, he's not former, he is a current Yakuza boss, who pines for his former love, who when he lost his job originally, way back, he said he'd had to break up with her because he couldn't support her, or he wasn't good enough for her. But she promised to sit and wait on him at the same bench every Saturday with lunch for the two of them every week, and he goes back and finds that she's still there. It's incredibly sweet. And then the third one is about a kind of obsessed fan of a pop star, Japanese pop star, and about how his love for her manifests itself. And all three slightly different stories, but all incredibly sweet and all told beautifully. I mean, it's something that I find true about most of Japanese cinema. They do imagery better than any other form of cinema, should I say. The subtle touches, it is all told in the form of these costumes, etc. And it's Japanese puppet theatre, their version of Punch and Judy, called Bunraku, which has narrators and then actors that act out the puppets. And these, what they call the bound beggars, are dressed like those puppets, and that's kind of the basis for the story. But wonderful direction, just fantastic. And again, the extras in this, we have multiple interviews with Takeshi Kitano, we have behind the scenes of the filming, we have a bit from the Venice Film Festival when it was released. So just an incredible movie, and one that I absolutely adored. Next up was a recommendation from Soldier Ronan that he had in his top 150 films I've mentioned before, his series going on, and it is a Yorgos Lanthimos film called The Lobster. And I have to admit, this is the first Yorgos Lanthimos film that I've ever seen, and as much as I knew about Yorgos Lanthimos is that his films are a bit weird, and lo and behold, The Lobster is plenty weird. Really plenty weird. So it tells the story of Colin Farrell's character, who a relationship breaks down, and he has to go to a hotel where he has 45 days to find another mate in the hotel, because that's the only two people that are there. And if he doesn't, he gets turned into an animal of his choice. He'll not be a genius to work out what animal he chooses to be turned into. The whole thing is played so deadpan the way through. But it is really funny in parts, really superly funny, like drolly funny. There are female characters played by Rachel Weisz and Lea Seydoux as well. And the whole thing is, I mean, while utterly bizarre, I watched it with the wife, and it kind of ends and you go, what was that? I mean, it's kind of genius in a lot of ways. I mean, Olivia Colman plays the person who runs the hotel. I mean, the fact she's great at that type of character anyway, where you're playing a very comedic role but playing it completely straight. The whole thing was kind of amazing, but also unsettling, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a weird world that it's been set in. The other part that also kind of I fought with for a while, and this happens quite a lot, is when things are very clearly shot in Ireland and you're trying to work out what part of Ireland it's from, given that that's where I am from, and I kind of worked out nearly to about 5 mile radius of exactly where it had to be shot, etc. But beautiful part of the world anyway, Kerry. But yeah, really great movie, and I really enjoyed it. And thanks for the recommendation, because I never would have found it otherwise. And nice slipcover for what was a couple of pounds on Amazon, this release. So I'm sure it's pretty much the same. So I did get to a point where I thought, I've just watched, am I ever going to see an average movie ever again? A bad movie? And anything that's not something that I really enjoy. But thankfully, along came the 101 release of Trespass. It's part of the Black Label series, which I do like collecting, I have to say, and most of the other releases I really find, but Trespass just isn't very good in my eyes. It tells the story of two firemen who are given a treasure map to gold or loot that are buried in an abandoned church, and they go there to find it from the country to a rural setting, and there's a bit of gang war. Druggies are there, and they kind of find them there, and the whole thing's a bit ridiculous to start off with. It's got Ice Cube and it's got Ice-T in it, William Sadler, Bill Paxton are the principal actors that are in it. But I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't think are very good about it. I mean, it's very much of its time. It's 1992. In the setting, the whole thing's way overacted, completely over. Everybody overacts in it, which, as the wife was watching it with me, she kind of says, "Is that kind of not of the time?" And maybe it is, but at the same stage, it was ridiculous. It was like the stakes were raised where they didn't need to be raised. The other thing about it is the dialogue is just horrific. I mean, it's the kind of dialogue that's written like Ice Cube and Ice-T must have been rolling their eyes at some of this stuff, because it's the kind of dialogue that I think was principally written, and as it turns out, was written by two white guys in the 70s. You can only imagine how absolutely dreadful that is. Now, if you like simple action, 90s action flicks where there's a bit of explosions, bit of action, etc., I mean, it's not a terrible example of that. It's just extremely hard to watch. As a release, it's pretty good. Like I say, there's an interview with Bob Gale, one of the writers, producers of it. There is an interview with William Sadler that's very good. There's commentaries. There, you know, the extras are there to watch. And I did watch them because I was trying to look for something else that was in this film, but ultimately it was a hard watch to do. It's not going to change your life. It's just kind of a bit contrived and a bit silly. What would actually might have helped, Art Dean plays one of the other characters that's in it, and Samuel L. Jackson I think was originally planned to do it, and it might have helped because it might have helped with the ridiculousness of the film itself. So that's Trespass. And then last but not least, I started on one of the box sets, the BBS Story box set for Criterion. I thought I'd make a run on that, and I started with the first one chronologically from BBS Story, which was Head. And Head tells the story of, well, rather shockingly to me, the Monkees, in what is a psychedelic film directed by Bob Rafelson, or Rafelson possibly, and written by Jack Nicholson, who formed what were pretty much the BBS team, or part of the BBS team, along with Dennis Hopper and people like that were more prevalent in subsequent films, like Easy Rider is the next one that's in the series, and that I shall watch pretty much straight after this video. This is not a very good movie in my mind. It's very much the product of drugs, in that it's very psychedelic in nature. It's very well made, it's very interestingly made, but I wouldn't say the Monkees were exactly the greatest actors in the world. They were kind of prototypical can't sing, can't dance, can't act kind of group, but they had a bit of a charm and charisma about them, and was kind of this kind of epilogue piece to Bob Rafelson doing the Monkees TV show, which lasted for 2 series, and they wanted to become more serious in what they were going to do, and two mixed effects really. You know, it's kind of, there's a couple of pieces of satire in there about Coca-Cola, etc., that are kind of hit and miss for me, but it's an interesting one because I was never bored throughout the movie. But an hour and a half long, the imagery was always, I suppose, one of those kind of psychedelic trip kind of movies. There's always something there to hold you in that's interesting enough, and some of the extras on this are really fantastic, and they will fit in, I'm sure, with the theme of the rest of the box. There is an interview with the director Bob Rafelson that I thought was fantastic, so about how they went from being the Monkees to being in this movie, and went around and did that. And then there's a great half-hour little documentary on the BBS group themselves, so where their origins came from, that I didn't really know anything about, and about how they became the kind of archetypal, you know, independent filmmakers around that time, around the late 60s, early 70s as it was. So yeah, not a great movie, but a really interesting release, and one that I subsequently will probably watch again, because again, it's a well-made movie. It's an interestingly shot movie, even if there's no really coherent plot or performance that really ties it all together. So that was that, and that is my week in film watching. Let me know if you've seen any of those. Let me know if any of them particularly stand out to you, or whether did you find something in Head or Trespass that I didn't particularly enjoy. In some ways I'm kind of glad that I didn't I didn't love a couple of movies, because I'm always kind of starting to wonder if every movie that I was going to see was going to be 4 stars out of 5 at the very least. And I don't like trashing movies at all, because people will get different things out of different pieces of cinema. But I can't lie, Trespass was one of the few poorly rated movies I have on Letterboxd, and we'll see. I'll watch it again next week just to try and get something else out of it. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everybody who has been interacting. It's been very touching and very reassuring that an awful lot of the people that I like watching have been commenting on my own videos as well. So thanks to you all for doing that, and I hope to see more great content from you all in the future as well. Take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you all soon. All the best. Bye.